Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family member? No names, just yes or no.
They forgot my birthday. Again. But this time, it wasn't just a missed call or a last-minute oops. Happy birthday, sweetie, text from my mom. It wasn't the usual lackluster candle from a gas station or a Facebook post from my dad with an old photo of me and my sister cropped awkwardly, with my name spelled wrong underneath. No, this year, while I sat in my apartment in Chicago alone after working a 10-hour day and picking up my own damn cake because no one else ever did, I opened Instagram and saw a video that split me right down the middle. My mom, my dad, and my sister, Mia, were standing outside our childhood house in Florida, grinning like they'd just won the lottery, clapping and shouting as Mia squealed and covered her mouth in fake shock. The camera panned to the driveway, and there it was, a brand new Tesla Model Y, white, shining under the sun, with a giant red bow on top like it had come straight out of a luxury commercial. My mom's voice, overly loud and sugar-sweet, said, "Surprise. Because you're our shining star, Mia," and my dad, chuckling, added, "Only the best for our girl." That video was posted at noon. On my birthday. No call. No message. Not even a lazy, hope you're doing well email. Just that. Just Mia, 31 years old, never held a full-time job for more than 6 months, queen of impulsive decisions, the human definition of it'll work out, getting a Tesla while I, Amanda, stood in the invisible background, again, same as always. I watched it twice. Not out of masochism, but because the first time I thought maybe, just maybe, I missed something, like a tag, a shout-out, maybe a line in the caption that said, "And happy birthday to Amanda." But no. It was just hearts and fire emojis and comments like, "Ugh, you deserve it," and "Best parents ever." I closed the app. I sat still for maybe 10 minutes, just looking at the blank TV screen in my living room. The cheesecake I bought for myself, that I had stuck a single candle into, was still in the fridge untouched. It suddenly felt like a joke. Like I was the punchline of a family skit that no one else thought was funny. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't call and demand an explanation. I just stood up, walked over to my desk, opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and calmly canceled the monthly transfers I'd been sending my parents for the last 8 years. 8 years. Every month, like clockwork, $1,200 into their joint account, just enough to cover their car payments, utilities, groceries, and whatever little emergencies they always seemed to have. I'd started doing it after my dad's minor heart attack, when they were drowning in medical bills and Mia had just blown through her savings moving to LA for an acting career that lasted 3 months. I never complained. I never used it against them. It was just what I did, because I was the responsible one, the good daughter, the one who got her shit together while everyone else flailed and leaned on me like I was some emotional crutch made of steel and patience. And don't get me wrong, this isn't about the money. I make enough. I've worked my way up from entry-level analyst to senior director in a finance firm that's one of the top in the Midwest. I own my condo, I've got a solid 401k, and I don't buy things I don't need. I sent that money because I thought it was helping. Because I thought it mattered. Because I thought I mattered. And I know what some people might say, it's just a birthday, grow up, or maybe the Tesla was from Mia's own money. But see, that's the thing. I know my family. I know the way my mom gets this glassy look in her eyes every time Mia so much as breathes near a goal. I know how dad clutches his wallet like it's a hostage whenever I bring up anything slightly indulgent, yet somehow finds the funds when Mia needs a new phone or a loan for her rent. I know Mia hasn't had steady income in over a year, and that her last attempt at a business involved selling aromatherapy oils from the trunk of her car. So no, this wasn't her money. This was their love. Their reward system. And once again, I wasn't in it. It's funny, in a sick kind of way, how clear things become when you finally stop looking for excuses. When you finally take the blindfold off and realize your whole life has been you sprinting a marathon while everyone else rides on your back, calling you selfish whenever you ask for a sip of water. I thought about texting them. Just a simple, nice Tesla. But then I thought no. Let them notice the silence. Let them sit in it. Let them scroll through their bank account next month and feel that empty space where my money used to land. Let them connect the dots. I wasn't going to blow up, wasn't going to have a dramatic fight, wasn't going to write some tearful letter. No, I'd just disappear. Quietly. Efficiently. Just like I'd lived unnoticed, uncelebrated, unimportant. And here's the part that kept ringing in my head as I brushed my teeth that night, looking in the mirror at a face that hadn't changed much in 10 years, but had grown so damn tired of pretending. I don't think they'll care. I think, deep down, they'll be annoyed. Confused, maybe. But not heartbroken. Not shattered. Not like I used to be, every time they forgot to say happy birthday, or showed up late to my college graduation, or skipped meeting my first boyfriend because something came up. And that realization? That quiet, brutal truth? Hurt more than anything they've ever said or done. So I blew out my candle. Alone. No song. No phone call. No card. Just me, my cheesecake, and the sound of my bank app pinging to confirm that the recurring payment had been permanently canceled. The silence felt good. Final. Solid, like a door had closed somewhere deep inside my chest. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have known, was that silence was about to be broken in ways I never expected. Because when the money stopped, the masks came off. And what I saw underneath, that's when things really started to get ugly. It took precisely 23 days before anyone noticed. That's not an exaggeration or a dramatized estimate, I counted, because part of me was curious, almost morbidly fascinated by how long it would take for my absence, or rather the absence of my money, to register in their world. Not my voice, not my presence, not even a simple check-in to see how I was doing after they so gloriously ignored my birthday. But the moment that money stopped flowing like water through a cracked pipe, suddenly I mattered again. Not as a daughter, not as a human being with feelings or history or boundaries, but as a utility, a service they assumed would always be there. The first ping came by a text message from my mother, late on a Tuesday night, the kind of hour when you know someone's been stewing, pacing the living room, flipping through bills while holding a glass of wine just a little too tightly. It was a short message, suspiciously light in tone, clearly crafted to seem innocent while still fishing for information. Hey, sweetie. Not sure if something glitched with the bank this month. Did the transfer go through on your end? That was it. No greeting, no mention of my birthday, no acknowledgement of the video or the Tesla, or the fact that I had gone radio silent for over 3 weeks. Just a casual nudge, a subtle pressure disguised as concern, the kind of message that might sound sweet to an outsider, but hit me like a blade because I knew exactly what it meant. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to escalate anything or create drama, I just didn't have anything left to say that wouldn't come out as either pathetic or furious, and I wasn't going to give them either of those versions of myself anymore. So I put the phone down, turned its screen down on the nightstand like I used to do with old boyfriends when I was trying to convince myself not to text them back, and I waited. Because I knew that silence would not be taken as peace, it would be taken as provocation. The next day, I got a voicemail from my dad, which in itself was unusual because he almost never called me directly unless someone was in the hospital or something had gone seriously wrong with the car insurance. His voice was chipper in that forced way people sound when they're uncomfortable asking for money, like he was trying to buffer his real purpose with artificial warmth. He said, "Hey kiddo, just checking in. We noticed your usual support didn't come through this month and wanted to make sure everything's okay. Give us a ring when you can. Love ya." And there it was, clear as day, my worth, once again, tied directly to what I could provide. Not once did he ask how I was doing. Not once did he mention my birthday or even pretend to be interested in my life. It was as if the only version of me that existed to them was the one that deposited money quietly and asked for nothing in return. What struck me more than the words was the timing. Over 3 weeks of silence after the Tesla reveal, after the public display of affection for Mia, after the bright red bow and the over-the-top celebration, and not one of them thought to reach out until the direct deposit stopped showing up. It made everything click into place, like puzzle pieces I'd been trying to jam together for years, finally settling into a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't look away from anymore. They didn't forget me because they were busy or distracted or aging and forgetful. They forgot me because they never truly saw me in the first place. I was a background character in the show that was Mia's life, a supporting role meant to deliver assistance, applause, and cash when needed, and then fade politely out of frame. The following week, things escalated. My inbox began filling with messages, not just from my parents, but from Mia herself, who apparently had decided she was the family spokesperson now. Her tone was different. Where my parents had tried to mask their desperation with pleasantries, Mia went straight for the jugular, wrapping entitlement in faux compassion. Her message started with, "Hey sis, I heard things got weird with mom and dad," as if I'd created the tension out of thin air, as if I had started a fire in a house they'd been dousing with gasoline for years. She continued, "I'm not trying to get in the middle, but they're really stressed, and I just want to understand why you'd cut them off so suddenly." That word, "cut them off," hit hard because it revealed so much. In her mind, what I had done wasn't a boundary or a shift in responsibility, it was an act of cruelty, an unprovoked strike, a betrayal. She didn't ask what was wrong or if I was okay. She asked why I was being so cold. She accused me, in the softest, most manipulative way possible, of being heartless. And I get it. I really do. If you've been spoon-fed love and praise your whole life, if your every mistake has been cleaned up by someone else, if you've never once had to consider the emotional cost of your behavior, then I probably do seem heartless. But that didn't make it true. What it made me was exhausted. Tired of playing the game, tired of pretending I was okay with being invisible until it was time to be generous. I left her message on read. No reaction. No response. I figured that would be the end of it. But then came the calls. One after another. My phone lit up like a slot machine every evening around dinner time. Mom, Dad, Mia, even my Aunt Joan, who never liked me much, but always liked gossip, all suddenly desperate to talk things through. And what none of them seemed to grasp was that I had nothing left to say that hadn't already been said 100 times before in 1,000 quiet, ignored moments. They weren't calling because they missed me, they were calling because the ATM was out of order, and now they were panicking. The following night, I opened Facebook and saw that my mother had posted one of those vague, fishing for sympathy updates that older people think are subtle. It's heartbreaking when the ones you love the most shut you out. Prayers for healing. And, just like that, I was the villain. The prodigal daughter who had turned her back, not because of years of neglect, but because she was cold, prideful, ungrateful. I stared at that post, reread it twice, and for a second, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so on brand. Public victimhood with no accountability. And suddenly, I wasn't angry anymore, I was free. But freedom, I would learn, has a cost. And the deeper price was still coming. Because the more I pulled away, the harder they pushed. And the harder they pushed, the more I saw who they really were beneath all the smiling holiday photos and empty platitudes. This wasn't just about money. It never was. This was about control. About keeping me in a role I never agreed to, one that I was never allowed to leave without being painted as the villain. What I didn't know yet was that the next message Mia would send me wouldn't just cross a line, it would burn the whole damn bridge down. And after that, there really would be no going back. The message came late on a Friday night, the kind of hour when people say things they shouldn't, when wine fogs judgment and old resentments start clawing their way to the surface, just waiting for the send button. It didn't start with a greeting, nor did it attempt to ease into the subject gently, like any normal person would when trying to have a serious conversation with a sibling they hadn't spoken to in over a month. No, Mia's message was sharp from the first line, soaked in passive aggression and sugar-coated cruelty that didn't bother hiding what it really meant. She wrote, "I just don't understand what you're trying to prove with all of this. If you're jealous, then just say so. At least that would be honest." There it was. Jealousy. The big, obvious word she had been dying to throw at me since the moment I stopped playing the role of enabler and quietly walked away. According to Mia's worldview, there could be no other explanation. It wasn't that I was hurt or tired or finally fed up after a lifetime of being sidelined and taken for granted. It had to be envy. Because in her mind, That was the only possible motivation for anyone pulling away from her orbit. She genuinely believed that my decision to cut off financial support, to stop answering calls, to stop pretending like everything was fine, must have come from a place of bitterness toward her success, her happiness, her new Tesla. The absurdity of it would have been laughable if it didn't hurt so damn much. I read that message twice, maybe 3 times, just letting it sink in. Letting her words twist around in my gut the way a knife twists when someone doesn't just stab you, but makes sure it leaves a scar. I didn't reply, not right away. Instead, I opened a folder on my desktop that I hadn't touched in years, one I kept not for revenge or leverage, but for the simple reason that when you're the one who keeps bailing everyone out, you start keeping receipts, not just financial ones, but emotional ones too. You hold on to them, silently, until one day, someone accuses you of doing nothing, of being selfish, and then you open the drawer and realize you've been documenting a quiet history of sacrifice that no one ever saw or wanted to remember. So I started compiling. Nothing dramatic, nothing cruel, just facts. Bank transfers, scanned checks, old email threads where Mom begged me to help cover Mia's tuition when she dropped out of nursing school, just for a semester, which turned into a year and a half. The Venmo screenshots where I covered Mia's rent twice in New York because she wasn't getting paid on time, even though she never had a steady job. The receipt from the down payment I gave my parents for the house refinance, which, now that I think about it, was finalized the same year Mia accidentally crashed her car and needed a new one. All of it. Quiet proof of every time I stepped in, kept things afloat, swallowed my disappointment, and kept my mouth shut. And then I sent them. One by one. Each screenshot followed by a single sentence, not accusatory, not angry, just simple facts. This was February, when Mom asked for help with the utilities. This was April, when you called me crying about the credit card debt. This was August, when Dad said Mia might get evicted. No emojis, no exclamation points, no dramatic flourishes. Just reality. Cold, clear, undeniable. I didn't say anything else. I didn't insult her. I didn't defend myself. I just let the evidence speak. And then I logged off. It took 2 hours before she responded, but when she did, it wasn't what I expected. She didn't apologize. She didn't even acknowledge the receipts. Instead, she doubled down in the most modern way possible by posting an Instagram story that wasn't directed at me by name, but might as well have had my face plastered across it. It was a selfie, her, sitting in the driver's seat of the Tesla, full face of makeup, fake lashes thick as knives, with the caption, "Some people just can't stand to see you happy. Block the negativity and keep shining." I sat there staring at that screen, feeling the familiar weight pressing against my chest, not sadness, not anger, but that strange mixture of both, tinted with disbelief that someone you shared a childhood with could be so willingly blind. She had always been good at performance. When we were kids, she could cry on command if it meant getting out of trouble. At family dinners, she'd charm uncles and aunts with stories about her ambitions while I cleared the dishes and got told I needed to smile more. At Christmas, she always opened the biggest box first and squealed loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, while I watched Mom beam with pride, as if Mia's excitement was a reflection of their parenting success. Meanwhile, I was the steady one, the one who didn't ask for much, the one who they assumed didn't need anything, not even love. Now, here she was, grown but unchanged, still playing to the audience, still rewriting the narrative so that she was the innocent star being attacked by bitter shadows. It wasn't just offensive, it was exhausting. It reminded me why I walked away in the first place. Not because I wanted revenge or retribution, but because I was tired of being rewritten out of my own story. And if that had been the end of it, I might have left it there, might have taken the high road and moved on. But of course, the universe, or maybe just fate's twisted sense of humor, had other plans. That night, after I turned off my phone and tried to sleep, I got a call. Not from Mia. Not from my parents. From Jason, my ex-boyfriend. I hadn't spoken to him in over 2 years, not since things ended quietly, without drama, mostly because I had been too emotionally drained to keep giving myself to a relationship that felt one-sided. We didn't part on bad terms. We just stopped. So when his name lit up my screen in the middle of the night, my heart sank before I even answered. And when I did, his first words weren't "Hey" or "How are you?" They were, I ran into Mia. She said, "You're not doing well. That you've been acting out." I didn't say anything right away. I just sat there, letting the bitterness rise like bile in my throat. He continued, "I don't know what's going on, but are you okay?" And just like that, I realized Mia wasn't just painting me as the villain within the family, she was spreading it outside, too. Shaping the story, controlling the message, making sure that anyone who might have once known me, loved me, respected me, now saw me as someone unhinged, unstable, maybe even dangerous. I told Jason I was fine, that I had never been better. And then I hung up, turned off my phone, and walked into the kitchen, where I stood in the dark for a long time, leaning against the counter, listening to the hum of the refrigerator as if it could drown out the noise in my head. I wasn't angry anymore. I was something colder. Something more resolved. Because now, this wasn't just about family. This wasn't just about birthdays or Teslas or forgotten favors. This was about narrative. About control. And if they wanted a story, then fine, I would give them one. But it wouldn't be the one they were expecting. There's a strange, almost absurd kind of pain that creeps up on you when the people who claim to love you most consistently remind you, without ever saying it out loud, that you are somehow always less deserving, always slightly out of focus, always in the room but never at the center of it. That kind of pain doesn't scream. It hums low and constant, like a faulty wire behind a wall, unseen but always there, buzzing under every smile and every polite thank you that feels just a little too empty. And on the night I found myself sitting alone in my living room, replaying Jason's voice in my head, his concern laced with Mia's fingerprints, I realized that this pain, this weight I'd carried for years, had become so familiar that I didn't even recognize it as a burden anymore. It was simply part of me, like a scar that healed wrong and became part of the skin. The next morning, after a night of shallow sleep and dry eyes, I found myself digging through an old cardboard box I hadn't opened in years, the kind you keep tucked away in closets or under beds not because what's inside is valuable, but because it's too heavy in memory to throw away. Inside were cards, birthday cards, Christmas cards, the occasional, just thinking of you note from college friends or coworkers I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. And tucked in between them, folded and worn at the creases, was the last birthday card my parents ever gave me, 7 years ago. I remember the day so clearly not because it was particularly special, but because it marked the first time I realized, truly realized, that I had stopped being seen as a person and had started being seen as a function, an account, a solution, a tool. It was my 35th birthday, and I had flown home for the weekend because Mom said she wanted the family to be together, which, in hindsight, should have been a red flag, since she never initiated those things unless there was some benefit attached. Someone needed a ride, a loan, a babysitter. But I went, naive and hopeful as I always was back then, still believing that maybe this year would be different. I bought myself a new dress for the occasion, brought wine from a vineyard I knew Dad liked, and even reserved a table at a small Italian place that had opened near their house, thinking we could enjoy a nice dinner together for once, without the usual tension or distractions. When I arrived, the house was quiet. Mia hadn't come home yet, though they swore she was on the way. Mom was in the kitchen half-heartedly frosting a store-bought cake, and Dad was fiddling with the thermostat because he thought the air felt stale. No one said happy birthday until I reminded them why I was there. Dinner didn't happen because Mia never showed, and I spent the evening eating dry lasagna leftovers while my parents watched a rerun of some crime show I hated. When they finally handed me my gift, it was wrapped in newspaper and tied with a piece of yarn. Inside was a candle, lavender and citrus, clearly regifted, judging by the faint ring of dust around the lid. Mom said, "You're so hard to shop for, Amanda. You've got everything already," and Dad added, "It's the thought that counts," without looking away from the TV. That candle sat untouched on my dresser for months. I never lit it. Not because I was angry, but because it felt like lighting it would mean accepting what it represented, a last-ditch gesture wrapped in obligation. And now, sitting on my floor surrounded by faded cards and unwanted memories, I realized that even after all these years, that candle might have hurt more than the Tesla. Because the Tesla, while flashy and expensive and obviously outrageous, was honest in its imbalance. It was a declaration of love and favoritism on full display. But the candle? The candle was a quiet insult pretending to be kindness. And somehow, that hurt worse. Later that evening, as if the universe had been waiting for the exact moment I hit emotional bottom, I received a letter. A real one. Handwritten, stamped, addressed in my mother's curling script. It had no return address, but I recognized the stationery. It was the same floral set she used for church thank you notes and neighborhood sympathy cards. I sat with it for a while, just holding it, debating whether to open it or throw it in the trash. But curiosity, that old cruel thing, got the better of me. The letter was long 3 pages, front and back, and filled with the kind of language people use when they're trying very hard to sound like they're apologizing without actually accepting any blame. It was a masterclass in deflection. My mother wrote about how hard things had been lately, how unfortunate misunderstandings had created unnecessary distance, and how she hoped we could find our way back to love. She mentioned her heart condition twice. She referenced how much we've done for you 3 times. And not once, did she say the words, I'm sorry. There was no mention of the birthday, no acknowledgement of the Tesla, no recognition of the years of imbalance and silence and conditional affection. Just vague regret and an invitation to return to the fold, as if I had wandered off without reason. And in that moment, something inside me hardened. Not in a cruel way, not in a way that made me want to retaliate or lash out, but in a quiet, final sort of way, the way a door closes slowly and clicks into place, not slammed, not forced, just closed. I knew, as I folded that letter back into its envelope and placed it on the table beside me, that I was done explaining myself to people who only heard what they wanted. I was done performing for an audience that had already decided who I was supposed to be. That night, I sat down and started drafting my will. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't born of some morbid spiral or a need to make a statement. It was practical, just like I had always been. I listed my assets, my accounts, my property. I named a charity, one that offers scholarships to young women from dysfunctional families trying to escape cycles of emotional manipulation and financial dependence. I set aside a portion for a few friends who had stood by me in silence over the years, people who never asked for anything and always made space for my quiet grief. And when I came to the section labeled Family, I paused for a long time, not out of hesitation, but out of reflection. Then I wrote a single line, no bequests. It wasn't revenge. It was release. And yet, even after all of that, even after the message from Jason, the Instagram story, the regifted candle, and the emotionally manipulative letter, I found myself, days later, standing on the edge of something I couldn't quite name. Because the truth is, even when you've made peace with walking away, some part of you still hopes, naively, stubbornly, foolishly, that maybe, just maybe, someone will finally see you. Not as a bank account. Not as a background character. But as a daughter. A sister. A person who gave until she had nothing left. I didn't know it yet, but the final message was coming. And this one? This one would burn away the last flicker of that hope. I used to believe that silence was the cleanest kind of goodbye, that if you simply stopped engaging, stopped responding, stopped allowing people access to your time, your energy, your peace, they would eventually understand. If not explicitly, then through the unmistakable absence of you in their lives. I thought silence was mature, that it was dignified, that it preserved the last scraps of whatever good memories remained without dragging them through the mess of confrontation and ugliness. But what I learned slowly, painfully, and with a clarity I hadn't asked for was that silence, to the wrong people, isn't interpreted as pain or protest or even finality. No. To people like my family, silence is a challenge. A vacuum to fill. A provocation. It's not seen as a boundary, but as an act of war. 3 weeks after the letter arrived, the one laced with veiled guilt and soft accusations so carefully wrapped in floral stationery, a new kind of message appeared, this time not via phone call or text or social media, but through another handwritten letter, though this one bore no traces of my mother's performative elegance. This time, it was from my father. The envelope was plain, the handwriting stiff and clumsy, like someone not used to putting pen to paper for anything more than checks and grocery lists. His words, though simpler than my mother's, carried a weight that felt heavier, not because they were profound, but because they reeked of finality masked as sentiment. He began by reminding me, without irony, of how much your mother and I have done for you over the years, as though keeping a roof over my head as a child was a form of charity rather than the bare minimum of parental responsibility. He talked about sacrifice, about how hard it was raising two daughters on a limited income, about the things they had to give up to make sure I could go to college, conveniently forgetting that I had worked 2 jobs and taken out loans that I'm still paying off. He mentioned how Mia, for all her mistakes, has a good heart, and how we should stop fighting like enemies because family is all we've got in the end. The irony, of course, was that for all his talk about unity and forgiveness, never once did he mention what they had done to push me away. There was no apology. Not for the years of favoritism, not for the dismissiveness, not for the silence on my birthday or the car in the driveway that symbolized everything I had tried to deny for years. Just more pleading for peace, for reconciliation, on their terms, under their narrative, with their conditions attached. And that was the part that struck me most, not just the words, but the subtext, the implication that my role in this family was not to be heard or understood or treated with equal affection, but to keep giving, quietly and without resentment, and to forgive without receiving a shred of accountability in return. It was not a letter born of love. It was a script, rehearsed and familiar, designed to pull me back in, not to repair what was broken, but to resume the function I had stopped performing. I wasn't being missed. My money was. My silence had become inconvenient, not heartbreaking. In response, I did something I never thought I would do, not out of bitterness, but because I had finally reached the point where I could see clearly, without the fog of guilt or obligation or false hope. I wrote a single email. No letters. No phone calls. No cryptic status updates or passive-aggressive jabs. Just a simple message that took less than 5 minutes to type and even less time to send. I told them I forgave them, not because they asked, and certainly not because they deserved it, but because I no longer had the energy to carry their weight inside my chest. I wrote, I forgive you. I release you. But I no longer owe you anything, not my time, not my money, not my silence. I ended it with a sentence that had echoed in my head for years, but never dared to pass my lips. Loving you has cost me more than I could ever afford, and I'm done paying the bill. I clicked send and stared at the screen, waiting for a feeling, relief, anger, something. But what I felt was stillness. Not peace, not joy, but the quiet kind of stillness that follows a storm, when the world hasn't yet recovered, but everything is finally, unmistakably still. And that should have been the end of it. That should have been the closing of the book, the last line in the final chapter of a story that had taken more from me than it had ever given. But life has a way of leaving just enough loose threads to keep you tangled. Because 2 weeks later, as I was sitting in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Portland, where I'd flown for a work conference and decided to extend my stay just to clear my head, my phone buzzed. One new email. No subject. No message in the body. Just an attachment. The sender was my mother. My breath caught, not because I was scared or angry, but because after all this, after the silence and the letters and the parting email, I hadn't expected anything more. I had made peace with being done. But there it was, digital and quiet, waiting to be opened like a trap laid out too carefully to ignore. I downloaded the file and opened it. It was a photo, one I hadn't seen in years, maybe decades. A scan of a printed photo, grainy but unmistakable. I must have been 8 or 9 years old, sitting at the kitchen table in our old house, the one with the orange countertops and peeling wallpaper. A birthday cake sat in front of me, candles lit, frosting smeared slightly on the edge, and in the photo, I was smiling but alone. No one else was in the frame. No arms wrapped around me. No hands helping me blow out the candles. Just me leaning forward, lips pursed, a child trying to create joy in a room that felt empty. There was no caption, no follow-up message, just that image. And I stared at it for a long time, not because I didn't understand what it meant, but because I did. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a memory shared in love. It was a message, the kind only my mother could send, layered in 100 meanings, none of them clear, all of them loud. Was it guilt? Was it a warning? A last attempt to make me feel something other than the stillness I had fought so hard to earn? I didn't respond. I didn't delete it either. I just closed my phone, placed its screen down on the table, and stared out at the ocean beyond the glass, waves crashing endlessly against a shore that didn't care who was right or who had hurt whom first. Because some stories don't end with a clean resolution or a final reckoning. Some stories just stop, and the silence that follows isn't peace or punishment. It's the truth you finally stop running from. And in that silence, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt free.